VanDerlyn was a competitive college public speaker ranked at both the state and national level. After years of a career and raising her family of 3 kids, 2 dogs, and 1 husband, and yes, we do raise our husbands, Karen joined Toastmasters in 2021, hoping to relive a bit of those college glory days. Not only did Karen find a place to speak, but she found a place for education, laughter, support, and camaraderie. Karen has served as our president, vice president of education, and our secretary, and was a Toastmasters International speech quarterfinalist in 2024. Please welcome Karen VanDerlyn with her keynote speech, Public Speaking as a Passion.
Thank you very much, Francine. Looking back, the Steins started when I was just a kid. When asked who'd like to read out loud in class, I'd vehemently volunteer. Oh, me. I was never afraid to speak up when called on by the teacher, and sometimes when I wasn't. My parents simply shook their heads when my report card had the usual comments. Talks too much in class. In junior high, I was one of 3 students chosen to read the morning announcements over the loudspeaker for the whole school every day. Throughout high school, I was a member of the drama club, and although I rarely made it onto the stage, I found new ways of expressing myself through our many vocal exercises. In college, however, is when it finally became clear, and I knew for the first time exactly who I am. I am a public speaker. Now, sitting here in a room of like-minded individuals, I feel your warm embrace surrounding me. However, trying to explain to others that you're a public speaker, well, you can get some perplexed looks. I'm sure some of you have gotten them as well when explaining your association with Toastmasters. Well, I am here to tell you that there is nothing to be ashamed of. We are Toastmasters, and it is something to be proud of. Today, for my keynote address, my goal is to entertain you, to teach you, and to help you become the best public speakers you can possibly be. I will be giving some ideas, tips, and tricks today that I have found useful in my speaking career, so it might be helpful to grab a pen and paper if you wish to take some notes. And this is also being recorded in case you need to refresh your memory of what your notes mean, especially if you take weird shorthand like I do during speeches. So let's pick up our story. College is where I found out exactly who I am. The story goes back to 1987. I was taking the dreaded Communications 101, Introduction to Public Speaking. And if any of you have attended college, you probably are aware of that class because everybody needs it to graduate. Well, the little girl who wasn't afraid to raise her hand, who liked to get onto stage, who liked to read the announcements, actually enjoyed the public speaking class. As a matter of fact, I wrote some pretty good speeches, if I do say so myself. Now, writing speeches and giving speeches, though, are 2 completely different things. In the beginning of our class, we wrote speeches. We learned how to construct a speech. But it was my very first speech where I got up and stood up in front of the class and gave my speech where my career as a public speaker began. I had written a very simple, informative speech on ESP, just what the sixth sense was and how people thought about it. It wasn't a big speech, maybe 5 minutes long. But after class, my teacher, my professor, her name was Donna. Don't ask me her last name, but I know her name was Donna. Donna asked me to stay after class. Donna said to me, "Karen, that was a fantastic speech, and you presented it so well. You really should think about joining forensics." My first thought was, what the heck is forensics? Anybody here know what forensics is besides dead bodies? No, most people don't. And so my professor explained to me that forensics, and this is the official definition, is the competitive interscholastic or intercollegiate art of public speaking, acting, and debate. Forensics is basically Toastmasters, but on the college level, with events for competition against each other. Now, of course, I said, I don't want anything to do with that. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And went about my class. I gave another speech, and the teacher said, you really should do forensics. I gave another speech, and my professor said, Karen, you really should do forensics. And then the next time I went to class, Professor Donna blocked the door to the classroom and told me that she would happily fail me in this class if I didn't attend at least one forensics meeting. Now, being a naive 18-year-old, I didn't know if she had the ability to do that or not, but I know that I didn't want to find out. So I attended my first forensics. And from there, my passion for public speaking was born. Forensics taught me many different things. The kind of speaking we do there at the college level is completely different. It's broken up into 3 areas: platform, oral interpretation, and limited prep. Some of this is going to sound familiar to you. Platform is giving a speech on a topic. Informative speaking, persuasive speaking, what's called after dinner speaking. Here in Toastmasters, we call that humorous speaking. And rhetorical criticism, where you analyze something. It's all things that we do here in Toastmasters. We did oral interpretation, which is where drama club came in happy. Handy, not happy, handy. Even professional public speakers make mistakes. We did interpretations of prose, short stories, poetry. We did interpretations of drama by ourselves, acting out the different characters in a piece of a script. Or we could do a duo with a partner where we each acted out our own piece of a play, never looking at each other, only staring straight ahead and reacting to the air as if we were reacting to another person. And limited prep was impromptu speaking and extemporaneous speaking. Impromptu speaking in 5 to 7 minutes. Anyone else think that sounds familiar? Or extemporaneous speaking, where you're given 30 minutes to prep on a topic and then give a speech about that topic. I excelled, if I may say so myself, in forensics. Not at first. There was definitely a learning curve, but I did have a natural ability for it. I was I was a communications major, so my written skills were good. I knew how to do research, and I knew how to present myself. And slowly, trophies started happening. Trophy after trophy. At the end of my college career, I ended up with 57 different trophies in public speaking. I was ranked #1 in New York State for public speaking at the college level, and I was ranked 20th nationally in persuasive speaking, a speech I did on chemistry lab safety and how college students were being blown up due to not having correct safety procedures. A topic that went over pretty well with my fellow college students who also had to take chemistry as a required class. So that's a little bit of my backstory of how I came to public speaking. And those 4 years of being a forensicator, for lack of a better word, really helped me evolve into Toastmasters today. Now, after college, I didn't have anywhere to go with my public speaking. So what did I do? Simple things. I became the Girl Scout leader. So I was speaking to all the groups of kids, sometimes leading events. I started doing the readings at my church and giving the children's message. I didn't even realize that I was keeping public speaking in my life accidentally, but I had always been enthralled with it. And then in 2020, a friend of mine mentioned Toastmasters. If it wasn't for Toastmasters, who knows where I'd be right now with the public speaking. But a friend mentioned it to me and said, hey, you did college public speaking. Don't you think that would be fun? And I said, you know what? Let me check it out. I came to this meeting, this very club right here. It was a brand new club that was just starting to form. I was a guest for several weeks before I made the leap and joined and became one of the charter members of World of Difference in 2021 when we formed as a club. Now, what I'd like to speak to you about today, now that you have a little bit of my backstory, is I promised you I would entertain teach, and help you be the best public speaker you could be. Hopefully you were entertained by my forensic story, but now is where I'd like to teach a little bit and give you some of the tips that I learned in 4 years of college with wonderful professors who taught me how to be a public speaker. And I'd like to pass some of this along to you. Now, as I mentioned, all my background of raising my hand in class and being in the drama club and being forensics all helped me become a public speaker. So here are some tips that I think could help. First of all, the most important thing you need to know is who is your audience? Who are you speaking to? Because if you don't have that, your message is not going to be aligned. Whether for me, I was competing against judges and against other students, and I had a category of what I was speaking in: informative, persuasive, prose, impromptu. What is your audience looking for? That is the number one question you should be asking yourselves when you're giving a speech. And what do you want to say to those people? What message do you want to get across? Then the fun begins. Once you know your audience and you have an idea of what your message is, the first thing you're going to do, and this is what I recommend, is brainstorm. Get out a piece of paper and write down every idea that comes to your mind about what you want to say to that audience. It can be anything that comes to mind. And sometimes for me, this process can take a week. I'll just stick out a notebook with a piece of paper, and anytime something jumps to my mind, I'll write it down. If I'm not near that piece of paper, I'll put a note on my phone to add it to my list. And why do we do this? I know it sounds silly, but believe it or not, your ideas are going to form from this brainstorming because you're going to notice that there's a thread in there. You're going to have all these wild and crazy ideas coming from all different avenues, and you're going to realize that some of them work together. And that's what's going to make your speech. Those are the points that you're going to be putting together. Now, once you've gone through your brainstorming and you've found those points, get another piece of paper. What do you want to say about those points? Start brainstorming again. What do you find important? Now, some people like to memorize speeches, some don't, but I just want to give you an idea that I'm giving the speech just based off some notes on a piece of paper. This is my brainstorm sheet. So I want to show you that it is possible to give a polished, how can I mess up the word polished? Give a polished public speech just based on some ideas on a piece of paper, but it is possible. So once you've chosen your topic, you're going to brainstorm again, and you'll see I have a ton of notes here about what I wanted to talk about today. And once you've found your topic and you've found your thread of ideas, next question is, does your message need any research behind it? Are you making any findings? Are you going to put out a suggestion? Well, then the first thing you need to do is do some research. You can't give facts without backing them up. So if you're giving a speech, perhaps on the amount of people who are afraid of public speaking, it might be good to know that that's the number one fear of Americans is public speaking, and have the resources to back that up. As the comedian Jerry Seinfeld said, more people are afraid of public speaking than death, which means that you're actually better off being in the coffin than being the person giving the eulogy. Words to the wise. We don't want to be those people when we're in Toastmasters. We are professional speakers. So now you've brainstormed your topic. You know your audience. You have your ideas of what you want to speak about. You have the research to back it up. Now comes the fun part, writing your speech. Now, not everybody likes to write out a speech word for word. Back in my forensics days, I had to not only write it out word for word, but had to memorize it word for word as well, because we were working on timing. And there was no room for ums and ahs. There was no room to go off on a tangent. We had a strict time period, and we could not mess up that time or the words at all. Now, I highly recommend if anybody's doing any kind of time speaking or competitive speaking, it is absolutely imperative that you write out your speech word for word. And you will thank me in a little bit when we talk about it later. But just an update for you there. So in your speech, you're going to need a very strong opening and you're going to need a very strong conclusion. Why is that? You need to hook your audience right from the beginning, and you need to close and leave them with a solid vision of what you said. Your first impression and your last impression are the most important. Yes, the speech is important too, but you want to grab their attention right from the beginning, and you want to leave them with something coherent, something that's going to stay in their mind long after the speech is over. So it is imperative that if you don't write out your speech, you at least write out your opening and your conclusion word for word and get to know it. Next, formulate how many points you'd like to your speech. You've gotten your ideas, you've gotten your topic. How many points? Now, I've done speeches with anywhere from 2 to 5 points during a speech. Most people go with 3. That seems to be the accepted minimum, but it is possible to do 2. It is possible to do as many as 5. For those of you who remember my speech, My Father's Hands, which was given back in 2024 for the International Speech Competition, I had 5 points because my speech was about a hand, so I wanted a point for each finger. It was recommended to me many times in my feedback to cut down the points, but I was very insistent that I needed to keep 5 points, and I did have to shrink my speech down to accommodate that. And then when you're writing out your speech, if you're writing out your speech, you have 2 ways to do this. You can write out your speech word for word, or you can write out your opening and conclusion as suggested, and then, like I'm doing now, just give yourself points and highlights. Now, when you're practicing, those points and highlights will become more and more comfortable. For people who are just starting out, I usually recommend word for word just to get comfortable with speaking in a time frame, with cadence, with how you're going to present yourself. And now I just lost my notes because I'm on the wrong page. Another thing that's important to remember when you're writing a speech is that writing to read something and writing to speak are 2 completely different things. You might write wonderfully on paper, but when you read it out loud, it may not translate as well. It's important to keep a more conversational tone like we have going on here right now, so that people are getting your message without feeling like they're being read to or presented to. They want to feel like they're having a conversation with you and they're picking up the information from you during this conversation. If you're reading word for word something that's been written for the page, it might sound not only a little awkward or a little stilted, but it also might come off as you're not communicating with them. You're communicating with them. We want this to be a 2-way street, not I talk to you and you listen. We want to go back and forth with each other. Plus, it helps if you get off track somewhere that you can just kind of pick up with where you left off without it sounding like, oh, I forgot my place. Where am I? Oh my gosh. You can just kind of pick up where you went along. And now the most important of your part of your speech. You've gotten your ideas together. You've done your research. You've written your speech. You've got your points together. And this is the part most people hate. Practice, practice, practice. And one of the ways my college professors made us practice that I hate to this day, and yet still do it, is I practice in front of a mirror. Of all places, I practice in front of a mirror. Why do I do that? I want to see how I'm reacting to people. I want to see what I look like. Is my hair falling in my face? Are my hand gestures too crazy? Are my hand gestures too stilted? I want to see what I look like when I'm presenting this speech. You want to use a timer to make sure that you're being in your time frame. Very important, especially here in Toastmasters, or if you're asked to be given a speech and they say, hey, we've got 15 minutes. Well, guess what? If you go for 10, you go for 20, they're not asking you back to speak again. For speeches like this, we can use our Zoom box so we can practice our gestures and make sure that they're visible in the Zoom box. I actually had practiced this speech standing up, but I got out of court late today and wasn't able to set up my computer properly. So I feel like my gestures are very stilted right now, and I hope you'll forgive me for that because I practiced it on a much larger scale originally. You could also see your transitions. Are you moving in the right places? If you're giving a speech in person, you're not going to be sitting still. You're going to be walking around the room. Are those transitions flowing? Are they natural? Is there quiet times when you're walking, or are you walking while speaking and keeping everything going properly? So these are some of the many tips that I would like to give you for becoming a professional public speaker. And now I promise you, sorry, I just saw a note in my chat. And now I promised you that I would give you some tips on how to be the best public speaker you can be. Well, number one, use all the advice I just gave you in point number two. That'll help. But honestly, use pathways, use Toastmasters International. Those have been vetted. Those have been done by professionals. Go in there and watch the videos. Fill out the questions. Read the handouts that they give you while you're doing your path. You'll find out that there's so much information in there. A lot of people go right to the speech and skip all the work beforehand. But if you use pathways, you're going to learn so much. I learned things that I never learned before using pathways because speaking for Toastmasters is a little bit different than speaking the way I used to speak before. And I've had to learn to use a different audience. Use your mentors. They have expertise. Or if you're doing contest speaking, reach out to someone who's done contests before, like Francine, Jim, myself, Akeem. We've all done contest speaking before, and we'd be happy to guide you in contest speaking because it is a little different than traditional Toastmaster speaking. And use your mentor to bounce ideas off them and get feedback. My mentor is taking notes right now. And compete in contests. I know you're like, I'm just starting out. I don't want to compete in a contest. But contest speaking is such a way of learning how to work and refine a speech. It gives you something a little different than what you've been doing in regular Toastmasters meetings. And I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted by the chat, everybody. I'm shutting it off. Using contest speaking will teach you how to work in a time frame, how to give a speech, how to revamp and polish up a speech and make it as professional as possible. Great when you're giving speeches on a larger stage than our little Zoom box here. So just like that little girl who eagerly raised her hand to speak in class, I am now the adult woman who is seeking opportunities to speak here in our club, in competition, and maybe even further in the world. There are some parts of my speech that I left out because obviously I didn't practice the time enough, but we can talk about that later. But for now, I want to say that I hope that you will pursue public speaking with passion, and I hope some of these tips and tricks will help you out. I can't wait to see your next speech. Thank you.
To lead us off, we have our evaluator number one, evaluating Karen VanDerlyn's speech, Francine Julien.
Karen, I absolutely love this speech, and I am so glad we recorded it because this is the perfect training. And there's still opportunities that you could have done better, and I'm going to tell you some of them. But first, let's talk about what you did really well. You started out with some great vocal variety. Me, that got our attention. And then I read the announcements over the loudspeaker to the whole school. That just helped us feel your excitement. And then you gave us your intro and you told us exactly what you were going to teach us. And I really liked the fact that you told us to get pencil and paper, that what you were saying is important. And I need to stop looking at you and start looking at the camera.
Just
But
a
anyway.
quick curiosity question. Did anyone take notes? Okay, a couple people.
Okay,
Okay, just
good
curious
job,
if
good
anybody did.
job. one of the things I really liked is you gave an excellent explanation of forensics. You didn't assume that we would all know what you were talking about. And you injected some great humor when you said, I didn't know that if she had the ability to do what she said, but I didn't want to find out. And I think you could have even added a little bit more vocal variety there to drag it out for that humorous aspect. I really like that you said even professional speakers make a mistake. That broke the ice for all the new people watching, thinking, oh my God, I'll never be able to talk like her. I noticed that in a networking event when I made a mistake. I'm like, even professional speakers lose their words, and everyone giggled. And you use great eye contact. Your note reading was so well done. It wasn't distracting at all. And had you not shown your paper like this, I thought you just had a couple bullet points. It was so well done. Something we could all aspire to, because in a long speech like this, unless you're telling stories that you've told over and over again, it's hard to remember everything. But even when you're telling the same stories you told all over and over again, it's nice to have a piece of paper with what stories you want to tell, so you tell them in the right order so people could follow the progression. And what I think you could do a little bit better is in your nonverbal. Now, some of the things you've done well in the nonverbal, you gave that perplexed look. You didn't just say there was a perplexed look, you gave it to us. But you spent the majority of your speech in prayer hands. And there were so many other things you could do. And then you also showed the back of your hands a lot. And the palms are known as being more inviting. So rather than the back, show your palms. But you did a really good job when you said there's a thread in there. And in my forensic days, and you put your hand over your heart. So instead of the prayer hands, I like to see some more of those type of nonverbals. And then I know I'm over, I'm sorry, but this was a long speech. You almost did the infraction. That is my huge pet peeve. You said, and when you saw my speech, my father's hands. Well, there's a couple people here who hadn't seen that speech. But you did a good job of explaining it so they would understand the reference. When you said, I used 5 points because it was about my father's hand. So that is something we all need to be aware of. When you give a speech, not everybody in the audience will understand every reference. You need to make sure you explain it so it's not an inside joke, because that just pushes people away. So anyways, I love this speech, and I can't wait to watch the replay, break it down, and post some shorts on our pages and our YouTube. Back to you, Toastmaster.
Thank you, France.